Hello and welcome back to another ATA Live, this one with a bit of a twist. I am your usual face on the screen, John Humphreys, but we're not doing any sort of normal ATA things, so I'll mostly be in the background. What we're going to be doing is hosting the debate that should be happening in this country. A few people have been saying, we're hearing two members of the same LibLab coalition talking about how they agree on 90% of things. Wouldn't a real debate be to invite somebody like Gerard Rennick or Craig Kelly? And that was floated, and I think the answer to that is hell's yeah. And if they're not going to do it, then how about we just do it and get this rolling? So I think Channel 7 is going to be showing their sort of their mock debate, and we're going to be having Craig and Gerard give their 2 cents over the top, or saying what should be said and correcting the record. So with that, by way of introduction, Craig, Gerard,
thanks, John, and thanks to the Australian Taxpayers Association for organising this. And it's good to see my old mate Gerard there up in Queensland. It's been a couple of years since we were battling away together there, down in Canberra, sort of thing. But look, it's certainly been an interesting couple of years. And what do you think of tonight? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, look, I mean, it's up to it's the ball's in Dutton's court. It's his, as we just discussed before we went on this. The latest news poll has Albanese 52-48. I would think that if that was the case and that was replicated next week, and I'm not saying it will be, but if it's anything like that, then the Liberal Party will lose seats. And one of the reasons, and to be honest, as much as I don't want to see the Labor Party succeed, the Liberal Party will have only themselves to blame because they do not have the courage to put forward substantial policy changes that will improve the lives of everyday Australians, and that's what Australians are looking for. And I know there's people inside that Liberal Party who consider themselves, these campaign specialists. They should have known that they had to run with policy differentiation and strong policy in order to stop the Labor government from attacking Peter Dutton, the person, because they're very good at attacking him. He's been attacked relentlessly throughout his career. They should have seen that coming. Labor just, went back to the same old playbook, and it succeeded because Peter was I won't say he was in front, but he was certainly level pegging up until the Queensland Cyclones, and then wind just went out of their sails initially, and then the wheels fell off throughout the campaign. As they backflipped on the sending the bureaucrats back to work. There was a lack of conviction on some issues, and their centrepiece policies were just so tepid to indicate. And I think I'm pretty sure you were in the Finance Backbench Committee as well, weren't you, Craig?
Yes.
Yeah. Like we'd go into those meetings, and I would try and push policy solutions. And they were never interested in policy solutions. It was just, and you'd come out of these backbench meetings just thinking, isn't this the place where we're supposed to be talking about this stuff? And it's interesting, actually. I asked Russell Broadbent, who's been in Parliament for 30 years, I said to him, Russell, what was the party room like when you first started? And he said, Gerard, it was much more vigorous than it is now. We would have some really good debates in the party room back in the early 90s when Russell first started. But now, of course, as you well know, Craig, if you put your stand up and speak, push forward a view, you'll just get your head chopped off. And, you were there in my time, which was the end of your era. There was yourself, George Christensen, myself, Alex sort of probably picked up where you left off. He wasn't initially so outspoken, but in the end he was one of the biggest speakers in the party room. Matt Canavan, to a lesser extent, Barnaby and Colin Boyce. But the rest of them just sit there, and if they do speak, they suck up to a minister who went and saw, thanks for coming to our local multicultural event, Mr. Minister. We're so lucky to have you here. And it was, it was really, teeth grating stuff. So the Liberal Party lacks vision, and it lacks courage of its own intelligence. So it's one thing to have courage of your own. No, let me rephrase that. It lacks the courage of its convictions, but I think, and more importantly, it lacks confidence in its own intelligence. It doesn't know why it has the ideals it does. And we can see that. I mean, the policies, apart from the nuclear one, which they ran away from when it mattered, And as I said to you before the show started, it would have been better had they gone down fighting on an issue rather than basically waving the white flag, which in my view is what they've done.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Humphries, we're waiting for this live stream to come on for the debate. Apparently, he said it might be delayed. Is that right? The start of it might be delayed.
Yeah, no, they set it for a very weird time, for about 1:15. I'm just checking their live feed now. The debate hasn't started, but I think they're just about getting ready to do the intro stuff. So with that said, the last quick questions before I bring it up. You'll see once it's up because it'll be up.
So
but, what are they going to say? What do we expect in the next hour of suffering?
Just firstly what Gerard was saying. I remember back there in the party room when that was the party room was meant to be the hotbed of debate for the Liberal Party, the contest of ideas within the party. And I can remember, backbenchers would get up, and you're right, they'd say, the minister came to my electorate the other week, and we went to the multicultural fair, and I'd like to thank the minister for how wonderful he was. So I think it was really pathetic. And you're right about the debate being no debate. The net zero, you remember when Morrison walked into the party room and just told us we decided to sign up to net zero. No discussion, no debate. I said, hang on, did I go out for a bathroom break and miss this discussion? It was just pathetic. And now you're seeing the consequences of that as we come into the last days of this election campaign. So we're up. Let's listen to what she's got to say, and we'll jump in from here.
All right.
Head to head. This is their moment to lock in your support. Our political editor, Mark Riley, will grill them on 6 key topics, then some rapid-fire hot takes. From the price of putting food on the table to keeping your lights on at home, how much money the government takes from your paycheck at the end of the working week, and the future of welcome to country ceremonies. Each leader will give a 1-minute opening pitch. We'll have a countdown clock to keep them on time. Then the grilling begins. Yeah, each can have 1 minute to respond to questions, then 4 minutes debating each other. We've warned them, this is personal. We are live across Australia into your lounge room. It's a place for honesty, not spin. This isn't Parliament. We aren't interested in Canberra bubble waffle and numbers that just don't make sense.
Stop waffling and get on with it.
Anthony Albanese or Peter Dutton's chance to be the leader the nation needs. And tonight we can reveal the 7 News election needle has moved slightly back towards toss-up, though still favouring the Prime Minister. Insiders tell us the teal vote is actually softening. That's good news for the Liberals in inner city seats, crucial to forming government. Watching along with you at home, 60 undecided voters chosen by a third-party independent of 7 News. The debate jurors will watch and react to the leader's every word. Then they will decide the winner in a 7 News Spotlight special. So it's a big 2 hours coming up, but now let's begin. Here is your moderator this evening, 7 News political editor, Mark Riley.
Thanks, Nat. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here tonight. We appreciate it. It's been a gruelling 4 weeks on the campaign, 6 days to go. This time next week, one of you will be the Prime Minister of the country. 2 million people have already voted. Another 18 million before 6 p.m. on Saturday. This is your final chance to connect with those voters, and my job is to allow you to do that. So let's get to it. Mr. Dutton, you've won the coin toss and you have elected to speak first with your opening statement. 1 minute, please.
Well, Mark, thank you very much, and Prime Minister, thank you for being here tonight. This election is all about who can best manage the Australian economy, and if we can manage the economy well, it means that we can bring inflation down. It means that we can help families with the cost of living crisis that this government's created. We live in the best country in the world, but we to that many families are doing it tough.
That government,
and as we've moved
Labor
around
government
the country,
created, I think it was created throughout COVID.
Literally in tears. They can't afford to put food on the table. They've stopped the registration renewal on their motor vehicle or on their house. They have had a tough 3 years under this government. And there are very few, if any, Australians that I've met over the course of the last 3 years who can say that they are better off under this Prime Minister's watch. We need to make sure that our country can be kept safe, and we need strong leadership in a very uncertain world to make sure that we can keep our country safe. And I believe very strongly that at this election, Australians will vote for change. There is a better way to manage our economy and to manage our national security.
You haven't put out
and that's
the change,
exactly what I have on offer.
Labor life. That's the whole
problem.
Thanks,
Mr. Dutton. Mr.
People want change, but they want to hear this.
Well, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Peter. Australians have a real choice this Saturday to continue building Australia's future or go back to the past.
We're going backwards, Albo.
Labor has a real plan for cost of living support today, whilst building with investment for tomorrow. Tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer, strengthening Medicare, including through our 1-800 Medicare line, making more things here in Australia, 20% cut in student debt,
renewables,
and a 5% deposit for first homeowners. We know that we live in very uncertain times, and that's why we need certainty. And during this campaign, we have put forward clear, decisive policies. The opposition have chopped money. Australians deserve certainty. What we will deliver is just that. We will trust in our people. We will value our Australian values, and we'll build Australia's future.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. You've both
were they reading that, you reckon?
Phrase in your opening statement.
They would have rehearsed
it. Is the issue that is galvanising the nation at this election. So our first question tonight is on that issue. Australian families, we know, are doing it tough. They're under the pump. Our viewers constantly tell us that they're getting smashed at the supermarkets every week. What will you do from Sunday to make their lives?
This election is about Australia's future. And right now, politics really matters. We want Australia to be united, to be strong, to be fair, and to be free. I grew up in
James Brown
cost of living, but we know there is more to do. That's why we'll deliver an increased tax cut, not just one, but 2 tax cuts in the next term. That's why we'll continue to support real wage growth. Real wages have grown 5 quarters in a row. We know that that is important as well. But we've also got the plans for cheaper medicines, $25, we've brought the costs down. Energy bill relief, the cheaper childcare policy that has benefited families by $2,700. We will continue to address those cost of living measures while getting inflation down. Inflation had a 6 in front of it when we were elected. It's now at 2.4. Interest rates started to rise before we were elected. Now they've started to fall, and we know the impact that that has on the Australian people.
Mr. Dutton, what will you offer to families in the way of cost of living relief from Sunday?
Well, Mark, we want to provide immediate relief to Australian families, and that's through a cut in the petrol tax by 25 cents a litre for petrol and diesel. And that means for families, it means for pensioners and for university students, for tradies, right across the economy, downward pressure on a very important cost that people have to face up to each week. It will save about $14 every time you fill up your tank. That's the immediate assistance. Secondly, $1,200 back by way of a tax rebate. That will help people deal with Labor's cost of living crisis.
Why not just make
the Prime Minister
promises
a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. The damage that's been done over the last 3 years is significant. We've had the biggest drop in living standards compared to any other developed country in the world.
He's correct. That's one thing Dutton's correct
in other countries before they dropped here. And they've only dropped by 0.25 of 1% after having risen on 12 occasions. So we provide that immediate relief. And then our longer term plan is to fix up the energy crisis, because that's what's driven up the cost of food by 30%. It's driven up the cost of everything across the economy. And that has to be.
You should come out here and say he's going to cut all the subsidies for renewables.
When you think about it, and it is emotional when you think about what families are going through, but that long-term relief is actually going to turn around Labor's very bad position.
All right, I've been lenient. Mr. Dutton, Mr. Albanese, the question was about families getting smashed at the supermarket. We heard all your policies and we've heard them, and now they're out there on the table. What is going to help families at the supermarket from Sunday?
What's going to help is the mandated code of conduct that we brought into supermarkets. Previously, the former government just had a voluntary code that was abused. People know that when they go to the supermarket and they see the price of a good
why don't they have a mandatory code of conduct for the banks
by $1 and then reduced by 50 cents, and they pretend that that's a price cut, people know that supermarkets are just having a land.
So what will you do about it?
Well, that's why we've got the code of conduct with real penalties in there as well as stopping price gouging. But if I can take up Peter's points briefly, the measures that Peter is putting forward are all temporary. They disappear in a year's time. The difference between that and what we're putting forward is that ours are permanent. Permanent tax cuts. Putting that $1,000 instant tax deduction will make a difference permanently.
When you're borrowing another
wage increases
billion
that have been delivered.
But I'd argue that
industrial relations policy would undermine taking away same job, same pay. They want to get rid of taking away work from home. We know that that's
what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I'd cut taxes to grow the economy.
That makes a real difference to
get
the
a high
living
velocity
standards
of
of
money.
Australia.
All right, but some of the change you're proposing isn't permanent either. The household energy rebate will disappear in 6 months. Mr.
That's a
Dutton,
fair
when that
point.
was introduced, you first called it a Ponzi scheme because it's taxpayers subsidising taxpayers. You now support the extension for 6 months. You did that just before the election. Your fuel excise cut that you talked about is taxpayers supporting taxpayers. It's the same thing, isn't it? I mean, it's
When
a
that
taxpayer-funded shopper.
electricity rebate cuts
We'll make
off,
a couple of points. I mean,
you're going to
firstly,
see
the
a
Prime
50
Minister
to
looked the Australian people in the eye
70%
before the
increase
last
in
election,
electricity
and
prices
on 97
overnight.
occasions said that power prices would come down by $275.
We're talking about petrol.
They've gone up by $1,300. Now, what we've said, as we said over the course of COVID, and if you look at the way in which the Liberal Party, the coalition, always manages money and the economy more efficiently than Labor, what we did during COVID was say, okay, we're going to introduce JobKeeper, JobSeeker changes. We help businesses survive and stay open. We help people keep their jobs. Well, the point I make, though, Mark, is that when we made those changes and when we implemented those plans during the course of COVID, those payments aren't still being made today. They were there to address the needs in the economy at the time. And our argument is that, yes, it'll take us time to clean up Labor's mess, but in the interim, that immediate support, that 25 cent a litre cut in petrol, that can be provided to help people with the bills that they're facing now, and also the $1,200. Now, our policy in relation to energy is to bring Australian gas back into the market so that we can increase supply. It brings the cost of gas down by 24%, which actually brings down
you're
the
right.
cost of groceries and the construction costs.
We will get on to energy, I promise you.
I agree.
Mr. Albanese, $6 billion.
I'll bet anyone 100 to 1 if Dutton will say the word coal. I don't want to take it. I'll give you 100 to 1.
People like cheaper petrol.
He mentions the word during
very
debate.
clear. I mean, that is something that Scott Morrison did before the 2022 election, and then it disappeared. It's the same policy being put forward
Your
here.
Your household rebate disappears.
But their income tax cuts that we have put legislated, they're going to actually increase the income taxes of all 14 million Australians, as
Jared,
well as
you'd agree, I think
other
we've got to
measures
cut
such
this
as the student debt cut of 20%, the free take that's made a
marginal
difference
tax
as well,
rates
cheaper childcare
we
they've
get
been
this
critical
bullshit
of.
argument.
Every
We're
single
cutting
one
taxes, we're cutting
the
taxes.
cost of living
When
measures
they're simply giving
has
back
been
what they
opposed
took
by the
from you
coalition,
as you went into
and
the
we
next
know
bracket
that
through
people are doing
inflation.
it
Yeah,
tough,
that's
but we
right.
also know
Yeah, no, I
this,
do.
and
I
your
mean,
viewers
I've
know
been
that
lobbying
we're
for
living
lower
through
income taxes
the
from the
biggest
day I got there.
inflation, global issue
And we're
since the
proposing to lift
1980s,
we'll
and the
basically
biggest
abolish
energy crisis
the
since the
first
1970s.
income tax
Now, that's
bracket from
something we've had to deal with.
18,200 to
We've dealt
45.
with it in a mature way, getting that inflation down whilst providing cost of living relief, because we know that people are doing it tough.
Okay, well, let's move on. Our second question tonight is on housing, a big issue. Mr. Albanese, you recently bought a $4.3 million beachside house. Mr. Dutton, we know that you've had $30 million in properties.
These two blokes have personally profited.
All agree.
By large
housing's not an issue for you, but for a lot of
migration,
Australians, it
pushing
really
up
is.
housing prices.
Yeah.
They
What
both
does
made
the
millions out of it.
Dream look like today for an average Australian in the property market, Mr. Dutton?
Well, Mark, it looks like a nightmare, and it's a nightmare because rents have gone up by almost 20%. And this Prime Minister has brought in 1 million people over the course of the last 2 years through the migration program. That is a 70% increase on any 2-year period in our country's history. So when you bring a million people in, they want a house for their kids and their family, fair enough. But what we've seen is Australians being displaced from home ownership, and our young Australians now saving harder than ever, paying more rent than ever, they're locked out of the market. So what we've said is that we want to work with councils to bring 500,000 blocks of land online through a $5 billion scheme for first home buyers.
Should start out.
$650,000
It's migration
mortgage,
is the first
or up to
problem.
that amount. You can
Yes,
deduct
you can
the
talk
interest
about
off your
supply of
taxable
housing.
income,
The
which will give
fundamental
you about
problem is
$1,000 a month,
excess
which will
demand
help you
through
with
excess
your
migration.
application to the bank,
Yeah.
but also it will help you meet the monthly repayments. We're going to put a 2-year ban in place for foreigners from competing against young Australians
Yet again,
in the
2-year
housing
ban.
market.
Why not
cut
make
migration by 25%.
And we will talk about migration.
He's too frightened
So,
to
Mr.
say, I'm
Albanese,
going to
what does
slash
the
migration rates.
Australian dream look
He's
like
too
for
frightened
you,
to say that.
or
The
average
final
Australian?
debate
Well,
is
Australians
behind
know
it.
that
He's too
this
frightened to
is
say,
an
I'm going
issue
to
for
slash
them
migration.
because it has got tougher to buy your own home. But they know it hasn't happened over the last couple of years. We've had a decade or even more of neglect. And the question isn't,
He had to
do you
fight hard to
identify
buy
a
that
problem?
place up
It's,
at
can you
Copacabana.
work towards a solution? And that's what my government has done. A 5% deposit for first home buyers will make an enormous difference, so that instead of never getting to that 20% figure, always paying off someone else's mortgage, people will be able to get into their first home and pay off their own mortgage. But the key as well is supply. And that's why our measures, whether it be increased private rentals through
about
our incentives
demand
for build-to-rent
migration
programs, our
Just
first
refuses.
home buyers scheme, or whether it be the increased support for social housing, we are concentrating on supply, not just demand, because we know that's the key.
That becomes an
Mr. Dutton,
excuse
you mentioned migration.
that you can allow
in
these
there about
excessive
housing.
rates of migration.
Well, let's do it like this, gents. They've just both directly answered the question of what to do about housing. We can pause them for a second and come back. We're not going to lose anything from the debate. But if you were on the stage, Craig, and they threw this to you, and then Gerard,
you've got to slash migration. You can't have excessive rates of migration going on like they've been. You can't meet the supply. Can't catch up with it. We build more houses than almost any other country in the world. Yes, we can build more houses, but you've got to start with the root cause of the problem, and it's excessive rates of migration. And these two blokes won't even talk about it. They won't even mention it.
Yeah. And the other thing is that work visa where they're coming in on the tradie visa, they're not building, those tradies aren't coming in to build houses, they're coming in to build renewables. So I'm getting reports of, like there's 300 Filipinos working in dongas out there on that transmission line between Wagga and South Australia. That's where a lot of these workers are going. They're not actually building houses at all. And the scant 10, there's apparently about 10,000 tradie visas issued out, about 500,000. But of that, I would like to see, I've asked this question in estimates yet to get a reply, how many of them are actually building houses versus how many of them are building renewables? Because what I'm hearing is there is a lot of tradies now involved in the construction of renewables. And I suspect that's part of the reason, because the new house constructions, and you posted this the other day, Craig, are falling. Now, if we're bringing in 10,000 tradies each year, it should still be increasing, albeit it's not increasing fast enough to keep up with immigration, but it's not. It's actually falling. So we've got to ask ourselves, why is it falling? Now, we know a lot of tradies go out onto the mines, fair enough, that generates exports and true wealth for the country. But I think the big secret, elephant in the room in the housing market is the lack of, or is the diversion of labour and tradies to the renewable sector. I mean, you think about it, all these wind farms, all these transmission lines, all these solar panels and wind turbines, someone's building them. And if they weren't, obviously it's the tradies building them. Well, if they weren't being built, they'd be building houses or getting on with the process of building factories. So renewables is not only costing us in terms of subsidies, it's inefficient, et cetera, it's actually diverting the workforce we need to be building houses. And that is something that, if I get in again or you get in, Craig, we really got to prosecute that in estimates.
No,
all right, I'm going to go back to see what the other two, the Lib Lab coalition was saying on this issue, and then just let me know. Shout out whenever you want me to pause it, but otherwise I'll do it at the end of each section.
Yeah, thanks.
And I know I've heard you say many times on the campaign trail thus far that the number of people coming into Australia is putting pressure on the real estate market or the property market. Don't we need skilled migrants? Aren't we screaming out for skilled migrants to build the sort of houses you're talking about?
Well, Mark, of course we do. And we've been, as a country, the net beneficiary of a great migration program. But it needs to be done in a balanced and measured way. This government hasn't had control of our borders. They've released people from immigration detention.
He should be hitting this hard, and not so much on the whole
every aspect
handful of
the
illegals,
migration
like as
program
in,
has been
illegal
mismanaged
illegals, as
by
in
this government. And
just
if
the
you bring in
entire
1 million
number.
people over 2 years, over a 5-year period, it'll be about 2 million people, a population bigger than the size of Adelaide, and yet money's been pulled out of infrastructure. The government's signature housing policy hasn't built one home. And the fact is that young Australians know this. Young Australians are putting off having children under this government because they can't afford a mortgage and a family at the same time. Right. And for many families otherwise, parents and grandparents, they're staying in the workforce for longer because they're either having to help their kids with a deposit or to make the repayments. Yeah, and that's the crisis that the Prime Minister's created. And that's why we have to cut migration, to focus on the skilled migration, but to make sure that Australians can get into housing.
Mr. Albanese?
Well, the truth is that the migration rates have fallen by 31% in the last
complete
year.
BS.
And after COVID,
Absolute rubbish.
of course,
That's
there was
off
going
the
to be more people coming in
560,000
short
Yeah.
term. The government is
After jump
addressing
by
that by lowering
Yeah.
migration at the same time as we're
100%.
They're still
building
the
housing.
highest
There have been
each year. It's been
400,000 homes
3 years under
completed
Albanese.
since we came to
Each year has
office. Our
been
Housing
higher than
Australia
any
Future
other
Fund-
time in our
one who
nation.
said under
Our
your stead.
Housing Australia Future Fund, which they held up together, the Coalition and the Greens, that's now in operation, 28,000 homes either under construction,
But not one
or
completed.
either under construction or in planning. Well, one of the schemes, the Help to Buy scheme, was passed in the Parliament last December. Now you're having a lend to oppose all of those measures and then say, why haven't the homes been built? The former government didn't even have a housing minister for half the time they were in office and invested a total of $5 billion. We've got a $43 billion Homes for Australia plan. We've lifted rental assistance by 45%, but we've done something else as well.
Okay.
We are training more tradies to
None of
work
those handouts
on
solve the
those
problem.
homes by giving a
You're
$10,000
just spending more
apprenticeship
taxpayers'
support
money to
program
help
to
other
encourage
taxpayers. Like
young
ideally, you
people
want
and people
taxpayers
retraining
helping
to go
themselves.
into construction.
Okay. Mr. Albanese, you've said, I think, a few times in this campaign, but I want you to say tonight, categorically, negative gearing is off the table.
Yeah, it's off the table, and the evidence is that we were elected in 2022. The coalition ran this.
He says, I've got
campaign
several
then.
investment
We
properties.
haven't done
I want
it
to keep getting
because of good policy.
It was recommended in 2016, 2019 by the Labor Party. The Treasury's done work on it, we know that.
It was, and we moved on because the key is supply. And that measure will not boost supply. So that is what we have been concentrating on. And Labor is the party of aspiration. We want people to get ahead.
Party
We
of
want people
aspiration.
to have access
You have
to their
destroyed
own
the
home.
great
And the key to
Australian
that
dream
is
for a
supply.
generation
Negative
of
gearing
kids.
never ever. Do you believe it?
No, I don't. The Prime Minister said before the last election that there'd be no changes to superannuation, and the Prime Minister's introduced a tax which taxes an unrealised capital gain. So just to put that into, sort of basic terms, if you've got shares and the shares go up in value, or if you've got a house and the house goes up in value,
This is
this
bad
government is
policy.
going to tax you on that gain before you actually sell the shares or sell the house.
Yeah, that's we know that's caught up in the Parliament. That's not
No,
law.
but that's
We'll
the
go to
government's
next-
policy. They
it's the
mentioned
policy?
nothing of it before the election.
Indeed. Okay, let's go to tax cuts, Mr. Albanese.
He's trying to
Your
deflect
policy is
that.
a $5 a week tax cut in 15 months' time. Not enough for a coffee. What difference is that going to make?
Well, it's a top-up of our tax cuts. We had the guts to make a tough decision, but it was done for the right reasons. I went along to the National Press Club, fronted up, and said that what we are going to do is to change our policy because we understood that people were doing it tough. You can't just say people are doing it tough, but I won't do anything about it. So what we did was we changed that to take money, $4,500 off our tax cuts, to make sure that those viewers at home on that first marginal tax rate got a tax cut. They wouldn't have got a single dollar.
This bullshit
That
about
is why
tax
it's important,
it's
and we'll
bullshit.
add to it.
All you're doing
by
is giving
targeting
back
deliberately
what
that
you
first
stole
rate, taking it
bracket
from 16 down to 15 and down to 14, which will put $2,500 into people's pockets at the same time, of course, as wages are increasing.
Okay.
And we're also delivering $1,000 instant tax deduction, which will make a difference, particularly for low and middle income earners.
Thanks, Mr. Albanese. Mr. Dutton, part of the rationale for this $5 a week and then $10 a week tax cut is to target what we call bracket creep. So your wage goes up through inflation.
Can you hear me there, Craig?
Tax.
Yeah, got you
That's
fine,
part
yeah.
of it. You say you have an aspiration to change the tax, to index the tax rates to alleviate the problem with bracket creep. Yet at the same time, you're going to this election, as the Prime Minister just pointed out, promising the people you will repeal a tax cut. I don't know of any leader who's ever done that. Is that crazy brave or just crazy?
Well, Mark, what we've said is
crazy,
that you can have the Labor option, which is 70 cents a day in 15 months' time, as you point out, or you can have a 25 cent a litre cut to fuel excise now. So $14 per tank per week. That's about $1,500 a year, $1,200 back for each taxpayer in an average income household. So $2,400. you equate that compared to the 70 cents a day, people are better off. So people can pay income tax, they can pay excise tax. There are other taxes that they pay. We're reducing that overall tax burden on the family, but we're providing that as an interim solution until we can fix up Labor's mess. The biggest issue at the moment is the fact, and the Reserve Bank governor's pointed out this, that the homegrown inflation under this government, the spending, the massive spending, has led to inflation staying higher for longer. And under this government, if they're re-elected with the Greens,
a lot of that was
more
that
spending will mean higher
unnecessary
interest rates,
spending during
and that
COVID.
would be devastating for home.
That was why we fought
right
so
the
hard
country.
against all these stupid lockdowns that destroyed the economy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, don't keep going, John.
I was going to say, I'm going to throw you guys under the bus a little bit here. We've heard that total non-discussion about non-tax reform from both sides of the Liberal-Labor coalition. If this question was thrown to either of you gents, if they'd done the right thing and put you up on stage and they said, you've got a minute, what is the tax reform this country needs to actually put us in the right direction? Gerard and then Craig. Gerard, what do you reckon?
Yep. Got to increase the tax-free threshold to 40,000 or 50,000, but we've got to lift that straight away. We've got to abolish payroll tax by bringing back, there's savings to be made. I'm just doing a like for like here, but we've got to abolish payroll tax. We have to increase the withholding tax on profits sent offshore to fund a cut in company tax here. We cannot have a situation where taxes on profits sent offshore are at half the rate of what taxes are if they're maintained here in Australia. That is huge. There are a heap of loopholes in the Tax Act. I'll name them for you. Section 2590 that gives big companies like Westfield a tax deduction when they build enterprises offshore, and that income isn't declared here. We need to tax universities. We need to tax Aboriginal corporations who don't pay tax on royalties and native title fees. We need to bring back tax on foreigners who make capital gains profits. We need to tax sovereign wealth funds here who are exempt from paying tax. So there's a whole heap of tax loopholes that we need to get rid of as well. And then I'm actually happy to get rid of the 50% CGT discount and bring back indexation and average the capital gain. And I've had this costed, by the way. It makes no difference to overall revenue, but I do think it encourages people to hold an asset longer and to actually try and generate income instead of speculating as a short-term capital gain. So I would back that in as well.
All right, I'll throw it out for you, Jared, to consider at some stage, but index to CPI plus 3%. But anyway, we'll discuss it off air. Craig, what's your 1 minute?
Jared, one thing I have a great concern about the international competitiveness of our corporate tax rate.
Yeah.
To me, especially with the US is reducing their corporate tax rate, I think it's down to 17%. So you might correct me there or not. But to have that corporate tax rate where we have in Australia currently at 30% for most large corporations, we've got enough things going against us at the moment. You've got your companies paying 2 to 3 times more for electricity and energy here in Australia than they have overseas. How are we going to be with you charging them more for energy, more for labour, and you're expecting to pay a higher tax rate in the end? We're just not going to get the investment that we need. And you talked earlier about during the Howard years, you talked about that good old Laffer curve. I saw when I came out and I looked at it, we're actually getting more tax to the government as a percentage of GDP at a lower rate when we lower the tax. So sometimes that question is, we could actually even get, from a government perspective, if you love big government, you want money to spend, you could actually more money to spend at a lower corporate tax rate.
Yeah, so look, but here's the thing, we don't have a company tax rate of 30 cents. That's the headline rate. We are one of a handful of countries in the world that actually has imputation credits and the only country in the world to refund imputation credits. So our true net company tax rate, and the tax office wouldn't tell me, but depending on what you read, is down to 13 cents now. But it is incredibly inefficient because companies pay company tax to Canberra, and then shareholders get paid a dividend. And then from that, the shareholders then go to their tax agent, or they do their own tax, and then the government then refunds 17 cents of that back to the shareholder, right? Why not just cut company tax straight to 10 cents? I'd actually abolish the whole imputation scheme, because I do think companies because they get limited liability, they do carry a cost to the economy. You can't have it both ways. You can't set up a company to avoid your downside risk, and then if you go bankrupt, you pass that on to the economy. And you also have the benefit in a company to choose when you pay a dividend, right? So you can, so I would do that, bring it down to 10 cents, get the franking credits all together, and then increase your withholding tax rate to 20 cents on all profits sent offshore. And if you look at what happened with Pfizer in 2022, they made $1.4 billion in sales here. They transferred $1 billion of that in royalties off to Ireland. There was a 10% withholding tax on the royalty. So we lost here in Australia a net $200 million on that $1 billion, $300 million in company tax. We got $100 million of it back in withholding tax. Here's the thing, Ireland picked up $125 million for doing next to nothing, and Pfizer made a tax arbitrage of $75 million. Why not?
All right, gents, I'm going to...
Yeah.
Yep. At some stage, I'll invite you on here. We'll debate dividend imputation credits because I think it's a fun topic. A lot of people don't understand. But just before that, there's one. Well, I disagree, but I won't dive into it now. But we'll do it another time. But there is an important question that just came in for you here, Gerard. It's everything sounds great, but what are you doing to promote gender pronouns? So where are you on the real issues? But anyway, let's go back to the debate.
I'm basically trying to, just do what those gender pronouns, what the mainstream media do to me and Craig, and not talk about them because the more attention they get. But look, what I'm doing is getting rid of the national curriculum and basically forcing states and to consult with their local communities. Yet again, ironically enough, that was brought in under Howard. I know he had good intentions by standardising it for children of veterans, of servicemen, which in itself, but ultimately the state governments should be responsible for setting a standardised curriculum across the states. It can't be that hard. We do not need a federal education bureaucracy.
I was just taking the piss for that question. But anyway, let's get back to the debate, and you can come in at any time.
The Governor and the Prime Minister has many times accused you of verbaling her. She did make some observations about homegrown inflation, but I don't think it was as broad as that. Mr. Albanese, Mr. Dutton saying that at some time in the future he will cut tax.
Well, he's going to increase it. He's going to this election campaign saying that he will increase the income tax of all 14 million Australians. And
I don't know why Dutton did this. They should have just backed in that tax cut.
That is the difference. They don't have,
as he said, it's peanuts anyway.
Going through.
That's right.
Such as the ones that we've implemented that last, whether it's cheaper medicines, whether it be the income tax cuts, the real wage increases. I mean, they have said they'll get rid of measures like same job, same pay that have.
We're talking about tax. We're talking about tax.
But that is just. I mean, that is not true, Prime Minister. Honestly, this whole campaign. It's hard to believe anything you say, and this is the case. Obviously, with the $275, you've never mentioned it again. The promises that you've made in relation to migration, the numbers blow out every quarter. You've made promises in relation to housing. You haven't delivered any housing. You have created an economic mess in our country. And our job as a Liberal government, as was the case for John Howard, is to clean up a Labor mess. And that's what we will do through the interim measures. But how we bring down prices and inflation is to reduce some of the economy-wide impact of your energy policy. And that is how we can bring down the cost of groceries.
Imagine if you could argue.
Imagine if you could
argue against net zero.
Provides a solution.
And imagine cutting the subsidies for renewables. You would wipe the floor without them.
You should be ashamed.
And you're hamstrung by all the
Peter can attack me, but I tell you what I won't let him do. I won't let him attack the wages of working people. I won't let him attack the changes that we've put in place for cheaper childcare. I won't let him
give it a break.
So that
cheaper childcare, rubbish.
Opportunity
That's
in
paid
life.
for by the taxpayer.
I won't let him get away with this nonsense about economic management. We inherited a deficit of $78 billion. We turned that into a $22 billion surplus. We delivered another surplus, and
what's the deficit this year, Mr. Albanese?
This year. Inflation
what's the
is
deficit
now
this year?
2.4% in the bottom half of the Reserve Bank band. It was 6 and rising when we came to office. We have worked hard. The Australian people have worked hard.
We tried to warn Frydenberg about the impact of that COVID spending.
Than this pretext.
And Labor egged it on, knowing that they'd end up.
That's right. They want to spend more.
If that's the case, if that's the case, if what the Prime Minister has just said is true,
I remember
if real
saying,
wages
Josh,
have gone up,
any idea how much money you're actually spending here? He
sort
of gave me this sort of vague look and sort of shrugged his shoulders.
Where's that number from? The 30%. Where's that number from?
The 30% increase in grocery prices is what's come through over the last 3 years. The cost of electricity is up by 32%.
Yeah, it would have been good to have a debate like what Pauline Hanson had a band
is twice that of our G7 nations. You have You can't stand here telling people that they're much better off after 3 years. If you had a good story to tell, Prime Minister, you wouldn't be running a scare campaign. You'd be talking about your so-called achievements of the last 3 years. Families are being smashed under your government. And if you're re-elected, the prices will keep going up.
The difference between us in this election campaign is that you have identified a range of issues, but you have no solutions, and you pretend that they've arisen in May 2022. Now, it's just a fact that the inflation rate is 2.4%. That doesn't mean that there aren't people out there doing it tough. Of course they are. But that's why we're undertaking these measures, to look after people, not to go out there, talk Australia down, and to try to secure political advantage from grievance.
Okay, good exchange. A few talking points in there. I'm going to jump on them from here on. Now, before we pose our fourth question, we want to talk to you about something that's happened just recently that I think you both can agree is a stain on our country. Anzac Day, people booing the country.
Yeah, hang on.
Started. I mean, that's a
he's told them what they should think
to happen. But it's
because I've got to admit, I'm finding it hard to make conversation.
There are people in Australia who are uncomfortable with being welcomed to country. Veterans who've said that they fought for this country, their blood is in the soil. Why do they need to be welcomed?
Let's be clear. There is no place for welcome to country for Anzac Day dawn services
in front of
the welcome to country. That is not the place for
Will you have welcome to country ceremonies? Will you have smoking ceremonies? Will you acknowledge the traditional owners at your official events?
Well, Mike, the point I've made in relation to the flag is that I don't believe that we can be the best country we can be if we're asking people to identify under different flags. No other country comparable to ours does that. I want to unite our country. I want every Australian to be equal. If you've got 65,000 years of heritage in this country, or you came here 6 days ago,
you don't. So
as an Australian citizen,
using
we
that
are
term.
all equal. And that's the point that I make. You can have respect, as I do, for the Indigenous flag and the Torres Strait Islander flag, but I want our country to be one, and I think that's the best chance of reconciliation.
That is the flag.
In relation to the welcome to country, first point I'd make in relation to Anzac Day is that is our most sacred day of the year, and it is a time to respect diggers, and it's not a time for booing any part of that ceremony.
We all agree on that.
In relation to the welcome to country otherwise, I think there is, and people have said this to me as we've moved across the country, there is a sense across the community that it's overdone. For the opening of Parliament, fair enough. It's respectful to do. But for the start of every meeting at work or the start of a football game, I think a lot of Australians think it's overdone, and it cheapens the significance of what it was meant to do. It divides the country, not dissimilar to what the Prime Minister did with the Voice.
Got to go to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, you heard that. It cheapens the traditional owners' respect that has been shown by people who allow.
You can go hard enough there, Dutton.
What's your view?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that I'd say about the Anzac Day commemorations and the way in which they were disrupted is that Peter and I agree, and I think most Australians will agree, that that was abhorrent and really an act of cowardice.
Dan Andrews is abhorrent. He's the one that should be in jail.
The bravery of those men and women who've worn our
Mr. Dutton has just said that the welcome to country is overused and it's cheapened by its overuse. You all
no one was booing
official events. I've been to a lot
of you see those disgraceful comments from that Jacinta Allen?
Acknowledgement
saying that people were booing the Indigenous service.
Well, from
what a piece of work.
It's a matter of respect, but it's also, of course, up to the organisations that are hosting an event of whether they have a welcome to country or not. It's up to them, and people will have different views, and people are entitled to their views. But we have a great privilege from my perspective.
There's been a weasel
Since
here,
the
Albanese.
last election, Sophie Scamps has voted most often with the Greens.
Why am I getting
apologies?
With many commentators predicting a hung parliament.
Who's this?
Can we afford a Labor
This is an
Green
advert.
minority government?
A YouTube
Don't
advert.
risk it. Authorised by
second.
Ahurst, Liberal, Canberra.
On Anzac Day, said in Maori language as well as in English, in recognition of the fullness and richness of the history of New Zealand.
But Prime Minister, do you think it's overdone? The welcome.
Well, what do you guys reckon? Welcome to country. Do you go far enough?
Yeah, it's divisive. Get rid of it.
I spoke to a lady today. I spoke about it today, and I said there is no place at a dawn service for a welcome to country ceremony. It is insulting to diggers. It is insulting to people that have put their lives on the line for this country and that have got lost relatives and family members fighting in wars, to have them stand there and be welcomed to the country where you said where their forefathers are buried. That should not be done at those Anzac Day dawn services. And for Dutton not to come out and say that simply in black and white is one of the reasons why he looks like he's going to lose this election.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest places to do it, as far as I can tell. So they seem to be setting their cause back because this is kind of piss people off. But Gerard, do you have another comment, or should I?
No. It's look, I agree. Look, the booing wasn't the most tasteful thing, I'll admit. But at what point do you make a stand? And as Craig said earlier, they weren't booing the Anzacs; they were booing the fact that this was done. If we don't push sooner or later, it's hard to say sooner or later. It's already here, and it is at meetings. It's at meetings. I've got a mate who works in a law firm. They do it at the start of every meeting throughout the week. I mean, it's absurd. And why? I mean, the hypocrisy of these people that try and say, we're all the same race, blah, blah, blah. And it's been totally spun around now, whereby it's either the immigrants or the Aboriginals, but anyone that was actually born here is treated like second-class citizens, and especially those people born here are proud of their own country, are treated like second-class citizens. And this is the problem, is that it's almost that they'll accept is when you're denigrating your own country's history. And I'm just not having a bar of it. Sorry. It's an absolute insult to the Anzacs, and it's insult to all our pioneering forefathers. Quite frankly, I oppose welcome to country completely, because it is political. And there's no other, the idea that it's recognising the Aboriginals and all this stuff, like, it's not, it's political. Just get rid of it. I'm done with it.
All right, let's see if Dutton can pin anything on Albo with this.
Welcome to country.
It's up to people to determine whether they have a welcome to country or not. But from my perspective, for major events, it is, of course, a sign of respect.
So you're going to continue to do it, and you're going to do it as selected events, only major events. Is that right?
I think at the opening of Parliament, it's appropriate, and I think at other very significant events of that nature, yes. But I do think that the most important thing we can do is provide practical reconciliation.
Okay.
I think the nation was aghast when the Prime Minister spent $450 million and sought to divide us over the Voice debate on heritage.
Yeah, good.
It's
good
on
that he's reminding people
I think
of this.
Australians in their hearts want to see a better outcome for Indigenous Australians.
Dutton, if he wants to win back anything this week, should go hard on the culture.
That hasn't happened under this government's watch.
He's been too tepid on the economic
we've
stuff.
Seen devastating
but if I was
circumstances
him,
in
I'd be going
Alice
hard on the
Springs
culture
in Darwin
right
in the
now.
last few days.
He needed to do this.
Get rid of welcome to country.
Yeah.
And we want to see the
he needed to be fighting on this 12 months ago.
Improvements for lives
like
of Indigenous Australians.
Well, I don't agree,
but
bring him better late than never.
To an honest answer to say whether it's overdone or not.
Right. So let's interrogate that. Prime Minister, we did have 18 months. You made the promise at the last election, and you followed that through, and people gave you respect for having the conviction to follow through your undertaking to Indigenous peoples. The Voice, you told us, was important for Australia, for who we are, for our standing in the world. It was polite request from Indigenous people, and you've dropped.
He's going to lose skin here, Albanese. This is not going to be good for him.
Because I respect the outcome. We live in a democracy. It was a request made not under my government, made at Uluru in 2017 under a process that was established.
Do you still believe in it?
Under the former government. It's gone.
No, man, what's your personal view?
Well,
because
it was not successful. I'll tell you what I believe.
We know that. But
we need to find different paths to achieve reconciliation in this country.
Okay.
And the truth is, the truth is that all governments,
can we get a straight answer?
That all governments have not
done
well enough. That's the truth.
Okay.
The Labor Party, the Liberal Party has not done well enough.
But you still believe, Christ. I mean, people want to know this. You still
Answer the question, Mr. Albanese.
What the Voice was trying
Answer
to
the
achieve.
question.
It's just the name that you've abandoned. You're still trying to get the objectives.
No, that process was not successful. Does that mean, though, that you shouldn't consult with Indigenous people about matters that affect them? Of course, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing through the Coalition of Peaks, through a range of bodies as well. The Coalition of Peaks address, for example, the National Cabinet process, and we need to do better to achieve those outcomes on education, on health, on housing. We've introduced, for example, in economic empowerment, a program to replace the old work for the dole schemes in remote communities with real jobs, with real wages, with real training.
Okay, with respect, we have heard those policies and we know them. Australia Day, should we change the date?
No.
No.
Okay. You heard what the Prime
You
Minister
found
said?
consensus.
Well,
No,
how about that?
That's impressive.
How about that? It was quick, but it's still an issue that is so divisive. We talk about it every year. How do we get beyond that annual conversation that becomes an argument?
I think one of the things that we need to do is to look at how we can bring people together.
Yeah. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds on this, Pam.
Sorry, and just part of my experience of Australia Day is that there is acknowledgement of the fullness and richness of our 65,000 years of history.
Oh,
but
give
there's
it a
also
break. It's
acknowledgement
not
of what happened
65,000
with
years.
settlement, the celebrating the 26th of January.
No one
when the
can
first
claim
fleet arrived,
65,000
and
years
the migrants
heritage.
who've come to
That
make
does
Australia
my
their
head
home.
in.
We have three parts of that history, and we should celebrate all of it.
Yep, I think we can all agree with that. But Mr. Dutton?
Well, Mark, there are millions of people who have come to our country from all parts of the world. We've been very fortunate that that's been the case. And Australia Day has significance for them and for their forebears, because that was the day on which they became an Australian citizen, on the date that they signed up to the best country in the world. So I think we need to respect it. I also think, frankly, in our schools, we need to stop the teaching of some of the curriculum that says that our children should be ashamed of being Australian effectively. We've made mistakes in our history.
Dutton's going to make ground
that,
if it's on.
we can't live with that shame forever. We need to accept that mistakes were made, and we need to make sure that we celebrate our national day as most other countries do, because
the left
we
is
need to defend what we have in this
we have to
country.
put police officers standing
we are
around
going to
statues.
move on, but I
Captain
can
Cook.
feel the frustration coming through the
The left is one of
cartoons of
violate,
This
tear
is
these
the black
statues down.
armband view of Australian
We
history.
need the worm.
We
Because I reckon the worm would have gone back to Dutton.
We're still arguing about it. I think that's the point that we need to get beyond this. Anyway, we're going on to defence. The world is changing before our eyes with war in Ukraine and the Middle East. You're both promising to spend more on the military. Prime Minister, you've made some comments subsequent to the opposition leader's announcement last week. But we still rely on the US principally for our protection. There's a guy called Donald Trump. You know, this is like Charles and Diana. This
cut immigration by 80%.
Here we go. Hang on. We're being gate crashed.
140,000 homeless and 3.
And the trumpets.
Can we trust Donald Trump to be our protector, Mr. Albanese?
Well, the relationship that I've had with the President is to have two discussions, and he stuck to the agreements that we made, that he would give great consideration in his words. We agreed on those words. So I start, I think, with people on 100% trust. But he has different views, different values.
Yes.
I support free and fair trade. He doesn't. He thinks
no, you don't, Albanese.
the way forward for the United States.
The security part is a question.
We don't have
Can
free
we trust Donald Trump to have our back?
This crap that we live in.
Yes, and the US system, of course, is very important. When I went to the United States for the official visit, I met with over 100 Congress people and senators across, Democrat, Republican. There's universal support for the relationship with Australia. And I think that gives us confidence is that it's in the United States' interest as well as in Australia's interest for that defence and security relationship.
There is a
to
point
be
there
in
that
place.
you haven't heard from Donald Trump, though. We know that you've attempted to get a meeting with him. You're in caretaker now.
I agree.
Mr.
Don't
Dutton,
trust
Can we trust Donald Trump to have our back?
We can trust whoever's in the Oval Office, Mark, and
no,
we
we can't.
respect the
Couldn't
views
trust Joe
of the
Biden.
American people. They've elected a president. I've been very fortunate to work closely with the Obama administration, with Trump, Mark 1, with the Biden administration. And I have found,
this is again,
even though we might have
that
political
could
differences,
be attacking here,
the overwhelming sense, as the Prime
Kevin
Minister
Rudd
points out,
is useless
from Republicans and Democrats on the
ambassador.
Hill and the Senate,
And Dutton should say he
West
should be
Wing,
recalled.
regardless of administrations, there is a strong support for the alliance. We've stood shoulder to shoulder with the Americans for 100 years. They came to our aid in the Battle of the Coral Sea, and we live in an uncertain period. Anthony describes it as the most precarious period since the Second World War. That's why we've announced $21 billion extra of funding into defence over the next 5 years to protect us and defend us and maintain peace in the region.
Yeah.
And we have to rely on the United States, as they do on us, for parts of the relationship and with our other Five Eyes partners as well.
Okay, you both trust Donald Trump. Just quickly, you got his number? You texting?
John,
we have a mobile phone, the US president?
Okay.
Yeah,
This
jump
is
in.
a game. So this is a game where Dutton is weak. Now, we've got Kevin Rudd there as our ambassador, right? The minute that Trump won that election, Kevin Rudd's position was untenable, right? They should have been immediate calls for Rudd to be recalled.
Yeah.
I want someone, it doesn't matter. If Biden had won, Rudd is the best man for the job. Absolutely. Leave him there because they like the way he attacked Trump, right? But the fact that Trump won, having Rudd there as ambassador, weakens Australia's relationship. I want someone as our ambassador in Washington that can basically pick the phone up, right, and dial Trump and know Trump's going to pick the phone up if we've got some problem. Kevin Rudd can't do that. But Dutton was so weak. He was asked about Kevin Rudd. He said, "Oh, you know, my feeling is instinct is to keep him there." You know.
And
No,
not
a
only
weird choice
that,
too.
I can tell you, I know for a fact that Dutton hates Rudd. So why he didn't, he's used those words to me. So why he hasn't, I mean, that is a classic case. I mean, I get, you're talking diplomacy here with your closest ally, but seriously, I don't think the current administration would have any problems with Dutton bashing the crap out of Rudd because they can't stand him either. It's not as though that administration wants him there. And when Dutton criticises Rudd, he's then, making the US administration look bad. It would have suited the US administration for Dutton to go in hard. Likewise, he could have gone with Trump on the Ukraine as well and said, look, we agree, we want out of Ukraine, we don't want other countries getting involved. Let's just pick up the phone, have a conversation, and end it, right? And I think Trump will get there, I think, but no, instead he's taken the side of the European aristocrats who overthrew the result in Romania, who's now banned Marie Le Pen from running. These are the same clowns that overthrew a democratically elected government in Ukraine back in 2014. There is a pattern occurring here in the European aristocracy, and today's, let's not forget, today's bureaucracy is yesterday's aristocrats, right? So we need to remember that. Bureaucrats, aristocrats, they're the same thing. And it is I'm really concerned about what's happening in Europe. I was concerned about what was happening in the United States under Biden. Luckily, the United States was founded as a bunch of patriots who turned their back on the corruption and the inherent, the hereditary rights of kings and queens. That's why they went to the USA. So that spirit is still strong in the USA. But the Europeans have the ones that stayed behind in Europe and didn't go to the free world. They're all the ones. They're all the ones that took the jab, so to speak, in COVID. And this is the problem. Europe's in big trouble because there is a great deal of tyranny happening in Europe. And Dutton is not calling that out. He should be. If he was a true, like JD Vance is, for example, right? If Dutton wanted to really distinguish himself here, he should be calling out, in terms of foreign affairs here we're talking about, notwithstanding you've got other problems in Australia that take priority. But in terms of foreign affairs, he should be hammering the European, EU, which is basically the aristocrats of today, and calling out their, the government overreach going on in Europe.
Yeah, these two guys on foreign policy, they seem to have a love-in on nearly everything and pretend to disagree. Craig, what would you be saying on that stage on foreign policy to differentiate?
Firstly, a lot of these European, Gerard says about these European bureaucrats and aristocrats, they are prepared to be fight to the last Ukrainian man of fighting age. I don't know how many people Ukraine have lost in this, how many young men Ukraine have lost in it for a futile war that should have been solved and resolved long ago. If you look at where all these people are out saying, yeah, support Ukraine, send them more weapons and things, they couldn't find the Donbass or Crimea on a map, let alone understand the history of those places, how they've gone from. Look, there's a great video online you can look at. It's the map. It's the borders of Europe since 1400, and how the borders have changed and swapped over. All these borders have basically been in dispute for centuries and centuries and centuries. It's not like Australia. We've got our island carved out, etched in our mind. That war is killing. There's unnecessary death, unnecessary waste. it's got to try and stop as soon as it possibly can.
All right, let's go back in and see what the fake politicians are saying.
Or Joe Biden, it's not the way it works.
All right.
When you have with any global leader.
That's the way it works with you, though, surely. You text people.
We text each other, we do. But global leaders, you set up, there's people taking notes from either side. It's not something that's a casual relationship.
Yeah,
we're not good enough to have Trump's mobile number, or he doesn't have one.
I don't know, but I know that.
Do you have
I bet you Joe Hockey had it when he was playing golf.
When we have discussions, what we do is we have note takers on both sides. We have them in secure rooms.
Yeah.
You don't have discussions with global leaders.
I understand. Well,
over the phone.
Well, Prime Minister, I'm aware of the protocols, and they are there. But I'm sure that on your phone there are lots of text messages from world leaders that are off-piste. Mr. Dutton,
I think the answer was no there, Mark. I think that was the straight answer.
Will you
get it?
Will he give it to you?
Well,
his number?
As I say, we worked with both Republican and Democrat administrations. We were able to negotiate the outcome on AUKUS, the nuclear submarine deal, with both the United States and the United Kingdom. A Democrat administration.
But we're talking about this. We're talking about Mr. Trump. He's elusive. He's elusive character to get hold of and to talk to. We know that all world leaders are lining up trying to. But just on that point, though, Mark. I mean, in the first Trump administration, we had Ambassador Hockey on the ground. We had the ability to reach into the administration and not just the president, but people of influence around the president to get the best possible outcome for our country. Many countries
has none of that connection whatsoever.
But many countries did, and there have been no exemptions this time. I mean, we've done no worse than anybody else. In fact, we've done better.
We've done better. No country has done better than Australia. The truth is that this is a different administration with a different president and a very clear agenda.
Difference is very interesting.
And that's why you need an ambassador that can get on the phone and talk to him. And you can't have Rudd. Rudd needs
for the United States. I see it as an act of economic self-harm, one that will increase inflation, increase unemployment in the United States. And I do see that there will be a reassessment of where it's going on. We've seen that with the changes in position that the United States has announced on a day-to-day basis.
He certainly made many changes. We started talking about defence in this section. Simple question. Which country poses the biggest threat to Australia's security, Mr. Dutton?
If you were to believe the intelligence that I received as Defence Minister and as the Leader of the Opposition, and no doubt that the Prime Minister receives as well, the biggest concern from our intelligence agencies and our Defence Agency is in relation to the Communist Party of China. And they're worried about the conflict in our region. They're worried about what that would do to impact on our trade, what it would do for our own security settings, and what we would need to do to respond to, say, a cyber attack on our country.
All right. Are you afraid of China?
Well, we know that China seeks to increase its influence in the region. And we're in a constant...
Should we be worried about China, though? Does China pose the biggest risk to our national security?
Well, China is the major power in the region which is seeking to increase its influence. But the relationship is complex as well, because China is our major trading partner. So what we have to do is to invest in our capability. That's what we've done, $57 billion in defence assets.
Yeah, I'm not interested in how much you invest. I want to know what you get for it.
Invest in our relationships.
That's right.
So that the best example of soft diplomacy, I think, is, and it has had bipartisan support, is the PNG rugby league team.
Yeah.
There's a whole range of...
I don't think China plays rugby league, and that's where we are.
Exactly.
No, that's the point. That's a good point.
Well, they play ping pong. We've had ping pong diplomacy in the past. Mr. Dutton named China. You didn't.
No, I said China is the biggest threat to Australia's country. Is the
Dr.
country
Humphries, can we have a quick pause on this?
Seeks influence in the region to extend...
What the point that needs to be made, if China is, let's just accept what they're saying is correct. The policies we have with net zero hands an economic, political and military advantage to the communist Chinese. We've got that black coal that runs down our eastern seaboard. We're not allowed to use it here in Australia, but we can send it off to the communist Chinese. We're not allowed to build coal-fired power stations, putting our nation at a competitive disadvantage. And yet China's building, 421 gigawatts of new coal-fired power under construction?
Yeah.
This is the treachery of net zero. In years to come, these politicians that have supported net zero to weaken our economy especially and to strengthen the Chinese economy. Everything with net zero, it's an asset transfer from this country to the communist Chinese. The solar panels that are subsidised, the wind turbines that are subsidised, the batteries that are subsidised, now these electric cars that are being subsidised, all advantage communist China at our nation's expense. And here we are, they're saying, oh, that's our biggest threat. Give me a break.
Yeah, no, good point, Craig. Very good.
It shows they're not serious about a lot of the issues they talk about, whether they talk about bringing industry back to the country or energy prices or the danger of China. If they meant any of it, they would be taking a different path on Paris. Right, dive back in.
Biggest threat, yes.
And that is what we are dealing with. Well, I'm the Prime Minister of a country, and how you deal as Prime Minister is diplomatically, and that is what we continue to do.
Okay. Now to energy. Mr Dutton, you're promising nuclear energy in 10 years. Mr Albanese, you're backing green energy. Why do you think your plan is best to keep the lights on, Mr Dutton?
You give me a break. Around the world, of the top 20 economies, Australia is the only one that doesn't have or hasn't signed up to nuclear power. It's a zero emissions technology
we have
that reduces the cost compared to the renewables only policy of the Prime Minister by 44%. That's the independent analysis. And we know that we can keep the lights on. We can firm up the renewables in the system. We can't pretend that, as the Prime Minister has said, that your power bill is going to come down by $275 because wind and solar is free. Australians know that that's not right. The idea of having a lot of gas coming into the system and making sure that we can use that as an interim measure is a central part to our East Coast gas reservation. We then move in 2035 right out to 2050 to invest in the best technology that we've got, the same technology that we've signed up to, both parties have signed up to in relation to the nuclear submarines. That will allow us to really underpin energy security for the next century.
Yeah, they should have went harder on the whole nuclear stuff.
And we need to take tough decisions to make sure that we can keep the lights on, we can bring power prices down, and that's exactly what we do.
All right. So you've heard that, Prime Minister, but I want to talk, and we will talk about nuclear, but I want to talk about your plan. If renewable energy is the cheapest form of power, why are taxpayers subsidising it in the multiples of billions of dollars?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the truth is that under the former government, 24 out of 28 coal-fired power stations announced their closure. What we need, so we were way behind. Nothing was happening in terms of the investment that was needed. Now, with renewables, there's been already enough projects approved to power 10 million homes. We think the future is.
Yeah, what about
when the wind blows and the sun shines? How much?
What about the other 14 million?
For the same reason that
or
it makes economic
and what
sense
about industry?
for listeners at home to put solar panels on their roof, and will subsidise batteries because it will make a difference, not just for them, but importantly as well, take pressure off the grid and benefit everyone through that measure. On gas, gas was $34 on the day of the last election. Today it is 13. That is the measure that we're put in place. We put in place those caps on gas and coal that have made an enormous difference.
Would you be happy, Mr Dutton, to have a nuclear power plant in your suburb?
Yeah, I would, Mark, as
Sorry, gents, just before we get on to nuclear, can I just ask you guys, what would your policy be to fight the sun? Climate change.
Climate change. You want to go first, Gerard?
Well, my policy would be to teach them mathematics and physics at school and explain that 100 parts per million is 1 part in 10,000. And as Newton's third law of motion says, that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. In order for one molecule to heat up 10,000 other molecules by 1 degree, that molecule has to be 10,000 degrees, right? Assuming equal weights, which it's not. Carbon dioxide is 1.5 times heavier, which means it only has to be 6,600 degrees. So just put that aside. So that is impossible. Gases are shocking conductors of heat. So one molecule of CO2 cannot heat up 10,000 other molecules. It defies the third law of Newton's third law and the first law of thermodynamics, which says energy can neither be created or destroyed. It is a lie, the greenhouse gas effect. Climate change isn't a lie because it's a tautology. The climate changes, right? So yet again, and this is the thing though, the phrase that you hear the most often with climate change is, do you believe in climate change?
Yeah.
Well, climate change is not a religion, right? So it's not something you believe in, it's something you understand. So that's the first thing, is that you cannot One molecule cannot heat up 10,000 other molecules. Yes, it's true carbon dioxide absorbs CO2, but guess what happens when something gets hot? It rises, just like a hot air balloon rises. When you boil a jug, it rises. And what happens when it rises? It cools and comes back down to Earth. Why? Because there's this thing called gravity, and that is what controls the heat, the volume of heat in the system. There's no doubt the sun heats the atmosphere, but the volume of heat, the amount of heat that can be controlled in the atmosphere, is controlled by the weight of the Earth. And that, we know, is a function of, Einstein proved it. He said energy is equals mc squared, right? Heat is a function of mass. Heat is kinetic. So if you teach the children our actual maths and science, and I mean, all this stuff I'm using is the stuff that I was taught in maths and science at school. It's not the stuff that, that's the first thing. Secondly, you can teach them net zero as a con. I asked the CSIRO for how they calculated net zero. They came back and said, which model do you want? There's 40 different models. None of those models include phytoplankton, which is the biggest absorber of CO2 in the world. It's all land-based CO2. So it ignores all the CO2 that gets blown around the world with the wind, convection, and of course a lot of that CO2 gets blown out to the ocean, falls into the ocean, and is absorbed by phytoplankton. So the models are wrong. And then of course there's Craig. He was the guy at first on it. I'll acknowledge Craig for this. The Bureau homogenises its records anyway. At least 1 degree of the climb in temperature has been completely fudged. So while there may have been a slight increase in the last 100 years, it is completely exaggerated by the Climate Division of the Bureau of Meteorology, whose only purpose is to sit there and homogenise weather records so that it appears the temperature is increasing. So forget all this stuff about, we don't need to go through the renewable stuff. We all know that that's a con. But the fact is that the notion that carbon dioxide is increasing at the rate they claim it is, increasing temperature at the rate they claim it is completely and utterly false. And I am prepared to debate anyone on the science of this, because I'll just use Newton's laws, Einstein's laws, and the ideal gas law. PV equals nRT. Pressure is force over volume. There's your two V's gone. Newton's second law of motion is mass times acceleration. Acceleration is basically a function of gravity. That comes from Newton. That's calculated via Newton's universal law of gravitation, and that was set down in his book 1687 book, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, which is what they used to call physics.
You're killing us with the science here, Gerard. So your policy is it's all bullshit.
Science, because I will call bullshit on it, and I will say to any scientist out there that wants to debate Newton and Einstein's laws. That's the reason why these are the two most, I call them Bert and Zach. This is the reason why they are the two most famous scientists in the world, because they were the laws that set down the laws of gravity and the relationship between gravity and mass and energy.
Not trying to disagree with you, just going for the quick answers on the climate policy before diving back in. Craig?
I'm sure you've triggered a lot of greens and teals watching, right? But let's just say, for the sake of the argument, you're wrong and these teals and greens are right. And CO2 is that control knob that you dial it up and allows you to control global temperatures, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the IPCC's numbers, if Australia goes net zero by 2050, how much warming would we avoid? And the answer is 1/100th of 1 degree centigrade by the year 2100. So we're doing all this pain, all this cost to the economy for 1/100th of 1 degree. Right? And plus, but if Australia doesn't, all these other nations will follow. Well, China's not following, the USA is not following, Russia is not following, India is not following, Indonesia is not following, no one in Africa is following. We are doing this, it is an act of self-harm. And I think if you argue that, it is complete BS that we can do anything to change the climate of this. And the warming that we've had, by the way, since the end of the Little Ice Age, the warming has been beneficial. We are far better off with more carbon dioxide and a warmer planet than what we had.
I agree. Yeah.
It's just another way of saying that 1/100th point. I think Bjorn Lomberg talks about this. If you did all of these policies, how much would it delay warming? And it's about a week. So that's the total benefit. I've often suggested that anyone wants to have any climate policy, it should be required before it goes through Parliament. They specify the change in temperature, and that way we can have an honest debate about it. But anyway, let's get into this nuclear next, and I'm sure you guys will have something to say about that once the two Muppets have shut up.
Hey guys, I'm going to jump off if that's all right. I've just got to do some calls and sort some booze out tonight before I get to bed.
Oh, in that case, do you want to give a final comment then? Give your wrap up.
Oh, look, the overall campaign's been very disappointing. I just think that it hasn't inspired Australia. This would be the most tepid election campaign. I mean, you know, with the greatest respect to Peter, Morrison, he's making Scott Morrison look good. And, you know, like he really needed to go much harder on Albanese. Albanese was there for the taking. I think he's missed his opportunity. Albanese, you know, heaven forbid he gets in again with the Greens. It won't be good. But, you know, I'll say this to our old party, Craig, they've got to grow a pair and they need to come up with some solid policies. And I'll name names here, like the likes of McGrath, who tells everyone to sit down, shut up and stick to the talking points. It's that constant nagging of stick to the talking points, stick to the talking points. These talking points are written by young LNP staffers who have no life experience. And it is a complete and utter travesty that there's some good people in the party, not you know it because they're gagged, that they need to let their backbenchers and their ministers off the leash if they want to start winning elections again. And they've got to come up and they've got to get some people in there who've got the balls to actually fight the fight as well as actually have the brains to solve these problems. Yeah, exactly. Mac. There's a comment there. We need leaders, not followers. And what the Liberal Party is breeding through this talking point, follow the talking points, follow the talking points, follow the talking points, is breeding followers, not leaders. And if I sound like I'm anti-Liberal, it's only because I expect more of them. Sometimes people say, "Oh, why are you bagging the Liberals so much?" It's because I expect more from the Liberal Party than I do from the Labor Party. The Labor Party doing what you expect them to do. It's the Liberal Party that aren't doing what we expect them to do, their followers, and they let their base down. You know, and I just hope the base send a message this election. If you are, you know, if you're a Conservative, do not put the Liberals first. Put the minor party, myself or Craig, first. By all means, preference Liberal over Labor, but you need to send a message because until such time as they get their asses kicked at the electoral booth, they are not going to change their ways.
Just saying that, Gerard, you're getting a lot of love from the comments in case you weren't able to follow them all as this was going. So there's plenty of very friendly comments coming in.
Gerard, mate, thanks for joining us. I just
You're welcome.
I noticed that the Liberal Party in the Senate preferenced other parties ahead of both Libertarians and People First in both New South Wales and Queensland sort of thing. They'd much rather have other people in there than you and me back to give them, you know, to keep them on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely. Like Dave preferenced Malcolm over me, despite the fact that I lost my pre-selection by a handful of votes and it was actually cheating. But that's it. That they would rather get rid of us because they know we can galvanise. Because it's not just about having good policy. The next step, and this is what People First wants to do, we want to grow this party into a party that can actually, you know, form a very good cohesive federation of state divisions. And we want to get 12 senators in the Senate to begin with. And then we're going to work on picking off lower house seats to get the balance in the lower house before becoming a major party ourselves. Because that's the one thing One Nation has never been able to do. Pauline has always run it, centred around her, and it kept a very tight, centralised ship. And that does not work in parties, you know, on our side of politics. We like to think for ourselves. And it's time that we, you know, even in the minor parties, we need a new way forward. And so I'm actually very invigorated and looking forward to, you know, regardless of what happens next weekend, at actually getting this minor party movement into something that's actually going to be a formidable force in the future.
All right, thanks a lot for.
Mate, we'll catch up. We'll catch up for a beer when this is all over.
For sure, Craig. Yeah, hopefully down in Canberra somewhere.
Thanks. Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't that be good?
Okay.
Could you just imagine how we go with those Senate estimates? You can imagine a lot of these bureaucrats are going to be watching the election results, terrified that you and me might be able to do some tag teams in those Senate estimates.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, thanks a lot for coming in, Gerard.
Okay.
Right. Next time. All right, Craig. Should we get back to seeing what the two chief Muppets are saying?
We know we've got a safe technology that the Prime Minister signed up to. What Prime Minister in his or her right mind would sign up to a nuclear submarine and put our sailors onto the submarine thinking that there was a concern about safety. Now, what we've said is that we will utilise 7 existing coal-fired power stations. Why? Because when they
you mentioned the
come to
word
end of life
coal,
and the
I've
coal-fired
lost
power
my
station
bet.
closes, that community doesn't have jobs. And the experience in the UK, where the Labor Party's fully signed up, in the United States, where the Labor Party's fully signed up to nuclear, in Canada, where the Labor Party equivalent is fully signed up to nuclear, we know that those jobs transfer from the coal-fired power stations across to nuclear plants. It's what Apple is doing. It's what Oracle, what Microsoft is doing in terms of their data centers. They're only using those nuclear power stations
in countries that have established infrastructure and a history of using it, and we know all that, and we have heard that.
I just make this point though, Mark, because it's
How do we get there without starting?
What we have at the 7 coal-fired power stations now is the distribution network. So the poles and wires are already constructed, and we have the ability to generate the electricity and to distribute that electricity to households and businesses. Under the Prime Minister's plan, they have to build 28,000 kilometres of new poles and wires, which is all going to be paid for in the tens of billions of dollars by taxpayers.
Which you will defund.
The Prime Minister never talks about
which you will defund, I understand that. If it's so good, why have you not been to one of those 7 sites in the past 4 weeks? Now, I know you say you've been in the region, but it's not being at that community.
We were at Collie in Western Australia, one of the
before
sites.
the campaign.
Well, as opposition leader,
this is an election campaign.
I've been to 3 communities.
If you're proud of it, wouldn't you stand out in front of them and say, this is the answer to our energy problem?
Mark, I've been very proud of the fact that we have taken a decision which I think is in our country's best interests. I haven't taken it for crass political reasons because I think that we're going to get lots of votes. I think, frankly, a lot of Australians, as you pointed out in your opening remarks, are concentrating more on cost of living than they are in what's happening in 2035. I am proud of the fact that we have a vision for our country which goes beyond 3 years. It will set up our energy security for the next century. And if we can bring the cost of electricity and gas down, we can bring down the cost of groceries, of costs across the economy. We were at BlueScope the other day.
We've seen your BlueScope, we've seen you all sorts of other places.
Well, not everyone's seen the BlueScope story, so we should talk about that.
Will we see you at a nuclear power plant site in the next 6 days?
Well, Mark, we've been to 3.
Group has easily become one of the most important parts of my self-care routine to ensure I'm prioritising
gate
recovery.
crashing.
Give me a second. Yeah, there we go. Thank you,
Peter
YouTube.
went to the Collie site, which I have twice, last year and then back again. What he would see is connecting up. It's going to use the same transmission lines that are currently used for the coal-fired power station.
This is a waste of money, Mr.
in 2027. He would see the batteries. The batteries which will power hundreds of thousands.
How much will your batteries
Hundreds
cost?
of thousands.
The 10 million homes you talked about only are powered part-time. What do people do of a night time? What about
That's
hospitals? What about cold rooms?
Right.
How does the economy run on part-time power?
Okay, you can answer his question.
Thanks. 100 that will power hundreds of thousands of homes.
For
It's
4
being-
hours, the batteries last.
It's being built there now. It will enable. I don't know how Peter thinks that water works. When it's not raining, people turn on the tap and the water's there. That's the same way that you can store energy. And that is what is happening. In WA, coal-fired power.
They never included the cost as well. That's why they say it's cheap, because they never include the cost of storing.
By batteries and
You're going to
backed
wreck
by
this economy
hydro
if you keep
as
going
well.
with this, Prime Minister.
Well, Peter,
you will wreck the economy.
Well said.
Good on
And
you,
you're doing
Peter.
it
That's
now.
fire up.
That's why
mate.
families are suffering.
Fire up,
It's
son.
why
Get into it.
30,000 small businesses have closed under
Get
your
into it.
watch.
Peter,
The
there are
largest
more
number
small
of small
businesses
businesses
today.
closures in the last 12 months than any 12 months
So,
in our
Mr.
country's
Dutton,
history.
I think what the Prime
It's
Minister
getting better now.
is that
What happened?
30,000 might close, tens of thousands have opened.
There have
So
never
they're
been
all-
more small businesses in Australia than there are today.
Right.
They're all
Well,
Uber
that-
Eats
we're getting
drivers,
off-
ABNs,
we're getting off topic. I love the spirit
That's
of
all
getting
the
off
small
topic.
businesses
No.
are.
Thank you.
I was just going to say there's more small businesses because they used to be big businesses, and then under Albanese they shrunk. But sorry, Craig, did you have a comment on that?
Especially the more ABNs he's talking about, that's all these students that have come into the country. They've got ABNs that are doing the delivery. What it was it the Uber Eats drivers you see driving around the city at night. That's all the small businesses are. Anyone trying to actually make anything or produce any goods in this country, the small businesses are going backwards at 100 miles an hour.
And the idea that the expensive energy isn't going to be harming business is just absurd on its face. They don't even need that evidence. But I think they're about to go to a break. Let's just check.
Thank you very much, Mark. How are you going at home? Is this helping you
What's
decide?
happening
Well,
here?
after the break, the rapid fire questions to decide the winner. And
Let's
There you go.
well, we can start on nuclear power while this break's on.
Yeah, well, I was going to skip the break. We can do that because we paused it. But go ahead. Your take on nuclear.
Okay, firstly, look, I was the only member of Parliament with a nuclear reactor in his electorate. Lucas Heights was 5 kilometres from my electoral office and about maybe 7 or 8 kilometres from my home where I used to live down there in Illawong inside. So I regularly went down there, spent a lot of time speaking with Dr. A.D. Patterson, who was running ANSTO, got to know them all down there and the work that they were doing, got to discuss this with them over a long period of time and a number of years. I took several years ago to Scott Morrison when he was first elected, the coalition should repeal that ban on nuclear power. Now, firstly, I don't believe the solution that Peter Dutton, the so-called solution Peter Dutton is talking about, we have to be realistic about this. To repeal that ban, you are going to have the balance of power in the Senate, and he's not going to get this at this election. So we're looking at on a cycle to 2028 until we can even repeal the ban on nuclear power before we can start. Now, we know the history of governments building things in this country. We're not going to see a nuclear power station, even if the Liberals did able to repeal the ban in 2028, until the 2040s. We don't have the time. We've got those coal-fired power stations closing down at a rapid rate. We've got to get new coal into the grid ASAP. Now, what I would do, I think that the government should not be investing taxpayers' money to build nuclear power stations using today's technology. Yes, we can go to South Korea, we could go to France, we could go to the US and just take what's off the shelf of today. As the world's leading depository of uranium, we've got to go beyond just selling that uranium. We should have a 50-year or 25-year plan to be the leading nation when it comes to nuclear science. The reactor at Lucas Heights in my electorate had to be built by the Argentinians because we did not have the science or the technology here to do so. So we should set ourselves a quarter of a century target to be one of the world's leading nuclear nations. We should be investing in research and development of nuclear power to get the next generation of nuclear power to bring into the grid in 20 years' time, not roll out the generation of nuclear powers that are available today. If we do that, we can give our nation a competitive advantage and be one of the world leaders in nuclear power. But to do that, you've got to get rid of these bans. We can attract the world's best nuclear scientists from around the world. I've had long discussions with Dr. A.D. Patterson from this. He came from South Africa and the UK, migrated to Australia. He said these nuclear scientists will come to the country because of the great lifestyle that we can offer, but we have to repeal the ban. Otherwise, it's a message to the world that we are not serious in nuclear power. I said, as the world's leading depository of uranium, let's also aim to have the world's best technology when it comes to nuclear power as well.
Yeah, I mean, we always did, well, not always, but historically we've had a comparative advantage, a competitive advantage in cheap energy. We've got all this coal, all this gas, all this uranium. It is absolutely ridiculous we've ended up in this spot. And just going to your point about the ban, that's always baffled me. Their argument is it's not economically viable, therefore ban it. Well, if they think it's not economically viable, why are they banning it? I mean, it's such a ridiculous argument on its face. Anyway, we go back and see what these Muppets have to say for the last part. What have we got now?
Just also what's on. Albanese, they're talking about big batteries. Dutton was right. That was a good point. The idea that you can replace baseload power with big batteries is going to create blackouts in this country like we have never seen. We've got this Araring power station due to close down in 2 years' time. You are not going to replace baseload power. Those batteries have got to take you all the way through the night, which in wintertime, remember, the solar power cuts off.
We prioritise short-term actions.
Remember, in wintertime,
go ahead, I was just trying.
In wintertime, you've got your solar power switches off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it doesn't start up again until 8 o'clock in the morning. You've got 16 hours through the night that you've got to get through, right? And then you've got to recharge your batteries in that little 8-hour window that you've got during winter. So the idea that you can just have batteries that last 4 hours, as Albanese is talking about, is economically reckless and is a danger and a threat to our nation.
And of course, the broader point that was brought up before: if it's so bloody great, why do you need to subsidise it? But anyway, let's see what they got to say now.
So we're talking about the Aussie dream a bit earlier. What comes to mind when you
say... It's Albo's place, isn't it?
Mr. Albanese.
Marriage.
Mr. Dutton.
Retirement home.
Oh, clever. that was a bit pointed. Just a reminder, that was the house that Mr. Albanese support.
And Jodie Hayden.
And Jodie.
And Jodie.
I know some people have erased her out of history, but I haven't.
No, of course. Do you wish you'd put it in Jodie's name?
It's in our name.
Yeah. But you know, might have taken the focus off you.
Okay, what about this? An icon of a TV show that's been on Labor's strategy ads. Mr. Dutton, your reaction?
Just a juvenile response from a Prime Minister who's not prepared to debate the topic.
Mr. Albanese?
Well, I'm prepared to debate the topic, and Peter was too busy yelling to hear our response, which is about it doesn't stack up economically in Australia. $600 billion.
Okay.
You're just lying.
Let's go this one.
You're lying,
Here is
Mr.
Dutton
Albanese.
next.
It
Mr.
is not
Dutton, do you know
$600 billion
how
worth of
much
cost.
they cost?
About $4.20.
No, you might get half a dozen.
Mr. Albanese.
$7 if you can find them, because it's hard to find them at the moment.
Yeah, you're looking at, I reckon you're looking at 8+. No?
Yeah, there you go. It's the Sunny Queen 12 eggs from Woolies. They're $8.80 from Coles. They're slightly cheaper at about $8.
Who cares? Come on.
Yeah, that's. I think you.
The best eggs you want from
Binners
down there at Helensburgh have the best eggs. Farm fresh, free-range eggs. Forget the supermarket wars
they've
and
gone up a
Coles.
lot, though. You're right. In the last, in the last few
Yeah.
months, especially the last year. Okay, a follow-up. What three things will be cheaper? First of all, if you stay Prime Minister, what can go down? Because that's what everyone out there is screaming for.
Tell you what, if you're doing a TAFE course, it's zero. Childcare, because of what we're doing on childcare. I'm trying to... the other measures that we're putting in place to...
Just want to note, only childcare if you send your kids off to other people to bring up, not childcare if you as parents decide to care for your own child. That they would not help with at all.
Because that's because you've got a unionised workforce that they can get the union dues out of to run their Labor Party.
Well, I think that's the polite version of their motivation. They just they seem to have something against parents bringing up their own children, from what I can tell. But maybe I'm jumping at shadows.
Your income taxes will come down as well.
In 15 months. Mr. Dutton, three things.
Well, electricity will come down, gas will come down, and groceries will come down.
Pretty quick.
There you go. Down by the eggs.
Hang on.
This man.
You won't have a nuclear power station at your best estimate for 12 years.
Yeah, I can only assume he's talking about gas, but even then, I think he's. I mean, it's easy to make these promises from opposition. Let's see if he gets pinned on that. It becomes his $275 energy promise. But
we've got Elon on the screen now. What's Elon got to say?
That's a nice picture. Let's see.
Elon Musk, a billionaire around 30 times over, taken into Trump's government, now winding back just months in, Mr. Albanese. What comes to mind looking at this man?
Tesla and a very rich man.
Mr. Dutton?
I think evil genius.
Evil genius.
Geez, I think that's a bit tough.
Mr. Dutton, have you
Musk has done some amazing things.
From Mr. Trump.
Look at that work on space.
I haven't
just genius
sought to be anybody other than myself, and I believe very strongly that, based on my experience working with John Howard very closely, he's been my political mentor, and I want to make sure we manage the economy as he did. I want to keep our country safe,
Will we still
as
have
any
a
Liberal
Doge?
leader would do.
We still have a Doge, just in a price going to run a Doge.
Why have you followed so many of the policies?
Well, government
even
efficiency.
today, saying that the ABC were part of hate media.
Well, government efficiency. I mean,
No. By the way, Libertarians, to make clear, Libertarians say cut the ABC, zero government funding.
Yeah. So didn't you do something at the front of ABC? What was that?
We did. We had a protest out at the front of ABC, cut government funding, and the police turned up.
Yeah. So the speed dial from ABC, perhaps.
Agree with.
Trump lied.
What we don't agree
Trump
with
lied because you want
is what
taxpayers'
your
money spent
assistant.
efficiently, as we're suggesting.
Can I finish?
Sure.
Is what your assistant treasurer Luke Howarth said, which was that you would have a Department of Government Efficiency based upon Elon Musk's model.
Albanese is against cutting government waste.
And you're going to sack 41,000 public servants.
Is it? So what was that, Craig? Is it Albanese is accusing Dutton of being responsible, and Dutton is urgently denying it?
He's saying, oh, how dare you consider cutting government waste? Right? We want to keep spending. Right? But what Albanese's done here, Albanese has actually stacked and gerrymandered the Canberra bureaucracy with tens of thousands of new bureaucrats who we know will be 90% Labor voters to ensure that those two seats in Canberra stay with the Labor Party and Pocock the Green. It has been the gerrymandering of the ACT electorate, right, that Albanese has done with all these public servants. And what that does, those two senators from the left in Canberra make it very difficult for the coalition to ever have the balance of power in the Senate.
Yeah, that is very true, and I think underappreciated. People who've heard me talk about this know I'm constantly rabbiting on that people need to look more at the Senate if they ever want laws passed. They talk about who gets to sit on the nice chairs, but if you ever want a law passed, you need to improve the Senate. That's why we need you there, Craig. But anyway, let's keep diving in.
We've said that given you've spent $425 billion extra, which is why people are paying more for their mortgages now, that we're going to take some of the wasteful spending that you've got in the budget. We have the highest per capita number.
$207 billion. We've improved the budget bottom line by $207 billion.
Absolute rubbish.
We've produced 2 budget surpluses, the government of which you were
You had rivers of gold coming in from high commodity prices that you never expected. And now this financial year, the budget papers show I think it was $27.6 billion in deficit for this financial year, even with all that extra revenue that they're getting. And we've got the next 3 years of Albanese government, the budget papers, right, let alone all the additional promises they've made during this election paper. The budget papers show there is $115 billion more they're going to need to borrow to cover up their excess spending. To think, that he's talking about we've made all this, spending cuts, it's just a joke.
And you gave the polite number because that's the financial year just ending. It's 42 for the actual budget year that they're budgeting for, 42 billion. Yeah. That's, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. And then of course, none of this counts all the off-budget spending, which nearly all of their climate change boondoggles aren't in the budget. They're all off-budget so that no one notices them. So
they've got so much hidden off-budget expenditure, which doesn't get put into that bottom line deficit. And we know this expenditure is all going to be done on very poor asset returns. And they'll, like the NBN, whatever they spent, the true valuation will be much, much lower.
Yeah, indeed. Some of that they just write off straight away. But anyway, that's a topic for another day.
Let's get back to it. What comes to mind when you see this, gentlemen? Let's have a look. Mr. Albanese.
Australia.
Oh, jeez.
Mr. Dutton. Well, a great system and one that we've invested in, that we believe in strongly.
And a cheap, tacky advert.
At the moment, you're paying about $23 to go and see a doctor, and so it should be accompanied by the credit card that you've got to take to the doctors as well.
Do you have that in your pocket? You're probably thinking he's going to pull it out at some stage. You got your credit card there?
No, I haven't.
You want to abolish bulk billing altogether by having a charge.
I wanted to make primary care sustainable.
By having a charge every time people visit the doctor.
$3
been no bulk billing.
No, but you charge now.
Again, Albanese is accusing Dutton of considering a potentially responsible change to make our welfare and health system sustainable long term.
You make stuff free and you can never meet the demand. That's what Dutton was trying to do. It was a $3.
It may not have been a perfect idea, but it was trying to make the system sustainable.
Yeah, it wasn't for pensioners. It wasn't for kids. Remember, at the moment, everyone's got that Medicare, whether you're a billionaire, a millionaire or whatever. Or someone on the pension.
And the sidebar's going to be the response we're just about to hear now. Now, I haven't heard it yet, but it's almost certainly Dutton is accused of potentially being involved with something responsible, and he's going to say, no, it's not true. I promise I was never responsible.
Yeah.
So it's so sad.
Now it's $43.
That was what you did.
Your charge is $43.
That's what you did. We're repairing your mess.
I think you both had policies in the past though that you walked away from. We talked about negative gearing. You've walked away from that, and Mr. Dutton's walked away from the 2014 budget, and we know all about that.
Yeah.
But he pretends it didn't happen.
Okay. We want to listen to a quick soundbite.
That my word is my bond.
Remember that, Mr. Albanese? I do.
I do.
Yeah. But
switching to comedy now. This is the comedy channel.
I changed my mind because I could not resile from the need to do something to help people because of cost of living pressures.
Sure.
So what
Where's
I did
that
was
girl
I phoned
down
it
in
up.
Canberra that
I
said,
went along
you're a liar,
to the National Press Club. I didn't pretend that we hadn't changed our position.
On the Lords of Parliament House?
I went along, I argued the case, and guess what? The coalition voted for it as well.
We gave you snaps of that. But you remember the interview, I do.
Yeah.
I put those arguments to you at that time, and I said, why won't you change this? Because all those things you just articulated were real then, and they're real now. And you said, because my word is my bond.
Except, Mark, that what occurred with global inflation, where inflation hit, here it peaked at 7.8. Overseas, it peaked.
Things got worse, is your argument,
It peaked
is
in
it?
double digits. It peaked in double digits.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, in all conscience, on the 1st of July, get $9,000 for all of us and a whole lot of people who are watching at home
But I
not
put
get a
this to you
single
at
dollar.
that time. I put that to you at that time. Mr. Dutton,
Yeah, good on you.
is
Well
your
done.
word your bond?
Yes, it is. And if you're talking about the stage 3 tax cuts, don't forget it's
See,
stage
this,
3 because
this
stage 1 and
BS
stage
about
2
these stage 3 tax cuts,
were
they're
introduced
just
by
giving back
the coalition
what they
government,
took
and
in
we
bracket
supported
creep.
stage 3
They are
tax
not
cuts.
real tax cuts at all. This
Well,
is
I
what-
mean, I'd prefer to have them than not have them, but here's a
Oh, look,
line
of
to
course.
consider on stage 3. I consider stage 3 tax cuts to be the only useful piece of macroeconomic reform for the last 20 years. And even then, consider this. It took 6 years to bring them in, and they compensated us for 2 years of bracket creep. That's we needed a stage 3
That's right.
tax cut every 2 years. If you're not having a stage 3 tax cut, that's something that big every 2 years, you're having tax increases.
One of the most important simple reforms that need to be done, we index to inflation what those taxation brackets are. So as your wage increases, not a real increase, just to catch up with inflation, you're not pushed up into a higher bracket paying more tax. And then we get these jokers come on to, oh, we're giving you a tax cut, aren't we wonderful? They're just giving back extra tax they're taking from us.
Which is exactly why they like to keep this current system, because under this current
Correct.
system, they get to have a multi-billion-dollar tax increase every year that they don't have to legislate. They don't even have to admit publicly. And then they can give a little bit of back to us occasionally and
They have
declare
wonderful-
themselves generous. How generous of them. Anyway, it's an infurious agreement. I think.
So the whole idea was to address bracket creep that you spoke of before. Under this government, people are paying $3,500 extra in tax over the course of the last 3 years.
But you
That's
voted for the change. So not only did we change our position, but it went through the parliament unanimously.
You changed it.
Okay, we're talking about your word being your bond. On that point, we want you to listen to something else, Mr. Dutton.
Well, I've apologised for the decision that we took in relation to work from home.
How did you get that policy so wrong?
We said in relation to public servants in Canberra that we wanted to go back to something like what it was before COVID, which was about 60% of people at work. Still flexibility for a lot of people, and believe very strongly in flexibility in work arrangements. It's down to 20% in Canberra. We have, on a per capita basis, the highest number of public servants in the world, and the government has increased the number of public servants threefold. The point I was making is that if Australians are out there working their guts out at the moment, an extra job or a second job,
vaping,
paying taxes, they expect their money to be spent efficiently. What the Prime Minister did, as he's done with a number of other issues, is twisted and contorted into something that it wasn't. And the point I make was that, yes, the Prime Minister's scared, particularly women and others, into believing that we were doing something that we weren't, and I apologise for that.
Okay, well, we know the conditions in the public sector become a template for the private sector, though, don't we?
But you said when you announced the policy that people could just job share. That's what you said. And since the backflip, a number of your people, senior people, have said that they still support the policy. It was just the wrong time. The truth is that this attack on public servants would then create a precedent for the private sector, which is why people were so concerned that it doesn't understand what modern families do. Like sacking 41,000 public servants.
It's not up to
you
what
had
modern
54,000
you are
consultants
getting paid to do work. It should be what is the most productive thing that you can do. If you can work from home and be productive, fantastic, right? But in many cases, you can't. You need to be in a team and office environment. It should be what is good for the business or the enterprise. That's the basic fundamental premise of why you get paid at the end of the week.
Well, that's true in the private sector. I think the thing people are missing a little bit with this public sector policy is it's actually quite difficult in many instances for the politicians to go around sacking a lot of these bureaucrats, requiring them to show up. A bunch of them would prefer not to. It's one of the ways to just decrease the number of people bloating out the Canberra bureaucracy who don't give frontline services, right? They just suck our taxes dry. So I think that was the smart part of the policy, but they're scared to admit that publicly.
Yeah, a real quick aside. There was a great Seinfeld episode where George was about to be sacked and they were going around the company doing like a doge sort of thing. And George took his nameplate off the wall so they couldn't find him, but think he existed. They couldn't sack him.
Anyway, he's going to run away from all his policies. We'll see. See if he sticks to any of them.
Various times during your period in office being paid a lot more than public servants, and you had robo-debt, and you had veterans waiting.
We're getting back into the weeds now, and we
support.
could talk about this all night. And I wish we could, frankly, because I think this is really helpful. However, time is closing on us. So your closing statements, gentlemen. I've been out there on the streets with you for the past 4 weeks. I've got to tell, I'm sorry, I'm going to be out there next week with you as well. So I know how hard you're working. The one thing people are saying to me, and I'm sure they're saying to you, is where's the inspiration? Where's the hope? Give me some hope. Give me something to look forward to. Your closing statements, 1 minute. Mr. Dutton, you're going first. Give the people some hope.
Well, Mark, firstly, thank you to you and Nat, and to Anthony as well. I believe we live in the greatest country in the world. I know that many Australians are really doing it tough at the moment, and I don't believe Australians can afford 3 more years of increased costs of everything. I want to make sure we can deliver support immediately through the 25 cent a litre cut in fuel tax, the $1,200 tax rebate, and I want to make sure that we can transform our energy market, get more gas into the system, bring the wholesale price of gas down by 23%. If we do that, we can bring down the costs across the economy. We can bring inflation down through good economic management. And that's exactly what is required in our country right now. If we make the right decisions now, we can protect our generation and future generations and make our country and our communities safer. And that's exactly what I'm dedicated to doing. So if people vote for that Liberal and National candidate at this election, we can get our country back on track, and we can make sure that we can invest into families, help grow our economy, reduce interest rates, and help Australians get through what has been a terrible period.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Albanese. People are crying out for hope and inspiration. Your 1 minute.
Well, I'm optimistic about Australia's future, and what gives me hope is the resilience, the courage, the optimism of the Australian people. We are the greatest country on the planet, and we're driven by our people, as well as, of course, the natural assets that we enjoy. And I want to back our people.
Natural assets.
Skills and training.
Coal,
That's
you
why
won't let
we're
us use it, you
investing
moron.
in every school by
I'm
giving
sorry.
a better and fairer schools funding.
Natural
That's why we're
assets.
investing
Our
in
best
early
natural
childhood
assets is the
education.
coal, that liquid
That's why
black,
we're investing
that gold under
in
our
free
feet,
take to
black
give
gold we
people
can't use.
that opportunity to be the best that they can. That's why we're working so hard with the Australian people to bring down inflation. If we get it right, the future is so bright for us because we live in the fastest growing.
Independents work for us, not major parties and big.
Perfect timing.
These are the ads on coming up on YouTube today.
Yeah. And for the people who say I should get the paid YouTube, I'm not giving Google any more money than I have to.
That's right.
So including our multiculturalism, of course, gives us those direct links to the economies of Asia.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for entering into this.
All right, and just before they pretend the debate is over, we're wrapping up the debate, the last minute closing statements from the person who should have been invited to the debate. One of the people should be Craig.
Well, firstly, it was a very disappointing debate. Peter Dutton was a little bit better than what he normally was, but it's too little too late. If we're going to try and get this country back on track, and the country is going backwards, every parameter you look at, we are going backwards. GDP per capita is going backwards. Real household incomes are going backwards. Rents are going through the roof. And it has never been harder for a young Australian to get and buy a home than it does. All because of these, and these reasons are all because of the failure of government policy. And Dutton had a golden opportunity to argue those points, and he's failed to do so. There was no discussion on the importance of free speech. After this election, we're going to live in a country, thanks to what both Mr. Albanese and Mr. Dutton passed before the election was called, with that hate crimes, hate speech bill, where you can now be sent to jail for 5 to 7 years for posting something on Facebook, YouTube, or X. Not a bleat from them during these debates, 3 debates on the subject of free speech. We believe that free speech needs to be embedded in our Constitution as it is in America. Why should Australian citizens be treated as second-class citizens when it comes to free speech and not enjoy the same constitutional protections that they do in the USA? We heard none of that from Mr. Dutton, none of that from Mr. Albanese. Look, it's very disappointing. I think our country is going backwards. And I can't see, if either of these two blokes are elected, how things are going to turn around.
Yes, it's I find it. Someone else put a comment up earlier saying of all the people we have in this country, these are the options we've got, and it's not just the two people. It's not like they've got a deep bench of very talented ministers sitting in the wings. This debate, this whole election campaign, to my mind, has been very uninspiring, with very few hints that either of the major parties are interested in doing any of the hard yards, which I guess is one of the reasons why these debates really do need the voice of some of the outsiders and the bomb throwers such as yourself.
The tragedies of this election campaign is that the Libertarians, and the same with Gerard, we've been squeezed out of these debates. We've been squeezed out of discussion. The only discussion in the ABC, I think they've given Gerard zero. The only discussion the ABC, the $1 billion ABC has done, is when they did something like, why are they sort of extreme party or something, and played this sort of scary music in the background, and why were the Liberals' preferences, when whoever the major party's preference is completely irrelevant anyway. That's the only mention we've got from the $1 billion ABC. You know, it has been a very disappointing election debate. I think we really need to have a hard look at our democracy about how these elections are conducted, because of the way it's done as a presidential contest between Albanese and Dutton. Remember, you've got a third of the population is not going to vote for either of those two blokes.
Yeah, which is it's why it's important to have voices of people such as yourself coming out, which we're at the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, taxpayers.org.au, the plug. We're very happy to put this on for yourself and for Gerard Rennick. So Craig Kelly from the Libertarian Party, and Gerard Rennick from People First Party, Craig running in New South Wales, Gerard's running in Queensland. But look, they're not the only two. If we give everyone a microphone, these things get a little bit silly. There's lots of good candidates from a whole series of parties out there. So go and have a look. But whatever you do, please consider looking at some of the candidates that not from the mainstream, that can potentially add a bit of policy heft and guts, political courage to the political system, because God knows we need it going forward.
Just one thing I would finish off too. Look, Gerard's been a good mate of mine. And we were good buddies down there in Canberra. We each gave us a bit of support during that difficult COVID period. So I'm wishing him all the best. But look, I must also give a shout out to the Libertarian Party up there in Queensland, to Jim Wilmot. I've been watching him and Lockie's work online, sharing a lot of their stuff. They've been doing a great job. So from a Libertarian point of view, here in New South Wales, Gerard and myself are on the same ticket in the Senate. In Queensland, it's a split ticket. So as a Libertarian, support Jim Wilmot, but make sure you give your second preference to Gerard.
Yeah, and then consider Malcolm Roberts as well in the mix. There's a whole series of...
That's the other thing. Malcolm I have great respect for as well. He was another bloke that I could trust in Canberra. So Queensland's a very, real difficult one. So in Queensland, I think we've got on our ticket, I think it's, of course, the Libertarians one, which is Jim Wilmot, 2 for Gerard and 3 for Malcolm. All three top blokes. I wish we had more senators in there, and all three of them could get elected. All three of them could be sent to, down to Canberra from Queensland.
Well, that'll be one of the ones to watch very closely on election night or in the following days. Look, there's an outside chance 2 could get elected in Queensland. It's not likely, but at this stage, let's just cross our fingers and work towards it.
Maybe that's a reform that we need, where the senators, we have a full Senate elections every election. So rather than just 6 people getting elected on a quota of 14%, if you had 12 senators elected, you could have a situation. If you had the full Senate elections, you could have a situation where you would get Jim, Gerard, and Malcolm all going to Canberra in the one parliamentary term.
Yeah, a lot of countries have something similar. Be great to see. But at least for the moment, Craig, thank you very much for coming in and giving your commentary, and for being so willing to show up to chats like this. Gerard not here, but thank you for when you were here, very much appreciated. And to all those other good candidates too, Jim and Jordan Ditloff down in Victoria.
Jordan's done a great speech. Yeah, Jordan's a great speech online. If you haven't seen it, have a look. I'll post that later today as well.
Yeah, so thank you for all of those guys putting in the hard yards. Go and check them out if you haven't already. That's the end of the debate from the Liberal Labor Coalition Muppets. That'll be the end of our response video. If you've enjoyed this, please make sure you go around and find us all on the social medias, Craig Kelly, John Humphreys, and the Australian Taxpayers Alliance on X, YouTube, and Facebook. Give us a follow so we can keep in touch with you, and so we can see you next time. But
and finally, thanks to you, John. I know you're traveling on the road and you're at a remote caravan somewhere for putting all this together. You got the kids with you, so we'll let you go, and you can go look after those kids of yours.
Yeah, appreciate it a lot. Thanks a lot, Craig. And everyone at home, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.